Ladies and gentlemen, councillors, will you please stand for the Chairman of West Northamptonshire Council, the Vice Chairman of West Northamptonshire Council and the Interim Chief Exec of West Northamptonshire Council. Thank you.
Councillors, ladies, gentlemen, please be seated. Normally, at this time, we have a thought for the day. However, I thought that it would be better and more intimate for all of us if we dispensed with it. Therefore, I'm going to ask the Head of Democratic and Electoral Services to read out the long list of apologies.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Councillors Rebecca Breeze, Joanne Blythe, Richard Butler, Judy Davenport, Nicholas Humphreys, Cecile Irving-Swift, Jeff Johnson, Anthony Locke, Charles Manners, Peter Matton, Daniel Rainbird, Catherine Shaw, Andrew Simpson and Stuart Tolley.
I've got a note of 2 late people, but Sally Keebles here is... Rosie, you are too. Thank you very much for being on time. Item 2, declarations of interest for members and officers. I'm not going to repeat that paragraph.
But does anybody have any?
Does anybody have any? No. Having none, let's move on. The Chairman's announcements. Item number 3. Ladies, gentlemen, councillors, welcome to this extraordinary council meeting concerning devolution. Last year, for those in the chamber, we held a discussion and a similar vote on the same subject. The vote was carried to merge with Milton Keynes, Bedford and Luton. Unfortunately, our potential partners voted to reject our inclusion. I'm sorry, I should have said WNC and the North. Now we meet again to discuss and debate our expression of interest. This is the beginning of the process. I repeat, it is the beginning of the process. Please treat one another in the chamber with respect. And, as you did in the last meeting, the budget, collaborate. I thank you. And now, it's my pleasure to hand over to my Deputy Chairman, who would like to say something to the Chamber.
Good afternoon, all. Chairman, colleagues, I would like to take this moment to address comments I made on the International Women's Day, which has caused serious concerns. I recognise that the words I used were inappropriate and capable of causing offence, and for that I sincerely apologise, which I have previously. Respect for women has always been a fundamental part of my life and my values. I've been married to my wife for over 55 years, and she remains somebody I love deeply and care for every day. I also have 2 daughters and a grandfather to 3 daughters, all of which I admire and respect and want them to succeed in every aspect of their lives. International Women's Day is an important opportunity to recognise the contribution, achievements and equality of women. And I regret that my remarks detracted from that in any way. I hope colleagues will accept this sincere apology, and I remain committed to treating everyone in this chamber and in our community with respect. I thank you, Chairman, and I thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor York. Sorry, offline. I thank you, Councillor York. Now we move on to the leaders' announcements. Councillor Mark Arnold.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Before we get into proceedings and the thrust of my address this evening, I'd like all members to take a moment and reflect upon our own chairman's recent loss of her consort, Colonel Tim Eastwood. I'm sure members present all share our most sincere condolences to the chairman for her loss and for her family at this really difficult time. I'm aware that the chairman has left invitation notes on your tables for an invitation to Colonel Eastwood's funeral, and all of you are welcome there. I know that many of you have already passed on your condolences personally to her. So from myself and my team on this side of the chamber, Madam Chairman, my sincere condolences. I'll hand over to Councillor Lister as a leader of your party. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. It is with great sadness that I pay tribute to Colonel Tim Eastwood, your consort, who has passed away at the age of 91. Tim was a man of immense character and a distinguished figure who served both his country and his community with quiet distinction. A fifth-generation Old Etonian who trained at Sandhurst, he was dedicated 35 years to the British Army. His service was global, from Norway to Kabul, and was highlighted by his prestigious command of the King's Troop Raw Horse Artillery. Beyond his military career, Tim was a devoted resident of Moreton Pinckney for over 35 years. He was deeply committed to public life, serving with diligence as a parish councillor and church warden. He was a keen sportsman, fondly remembered for his love of horse riding, fencing and tennis. As the husband and consort to our chairman, Tim was a familiar and highly respected presence within this council. He was a source of steadfast support to Alison, both in her civic role and since she first became a councillor for South Northamptonshire nearly 5 years ago. On a personal note, I remember fondly my own conversations with Tim regarding the appropriateness of men wearing ties, and someone who, like Tim, is rarely seen without one. It was a tradition and a standard we very much shared. Those exchanges perfectly captured the man I knew, a gentleman of great intellect and warmth who brought a sense of dignity to everything he did. He will be deeply missed by all who had the privilege of knowing him. Our heartfelt thoughts and condolences are with Alison and the entire Eastwood family at this difficult time. In memory of Colonel Tim Eastwood, an officer, a gentleman and a dear friend to this council, I would now ask you all to stand and with me for a minute's silence. Thank you.
Before we move on, I would just like to say thank you. I was proud to be Tim's wife, but I was also proud to have him as my consort. So thank you for your generosity this week. Thank you for your endless letters, notes, and phone calls. They were deeply appreciated, and Tim would never have expected to have a flag fly at half-mast. It would truly have been appreciated. Thank you. And now, I think that we move back to Mark Arnold, who has something else to say in his announcement.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Lister, for your added words there. I won't take too much longer of the Chamber's time before we work on to substantial business. But I would like to place on record my appreciation for Councillor York for delivering his apology to the Chamber to you all on this occasion, whilst reports in the media of questioned silence and opposition members have publicly seemed to condemn behaviour. I'm not going to get into a game of throwing stones in glass houses like other members opposite have engaged in this week. I think we moved past that kind of politics on May the 1st last year, and we will not engage in that any further at this time. But where we are is a very difficult place in public life. Everyone has to uphold the highest standards. I don't share Councillor York's view on that. I don't agree with the statement he made, but I ask the members present and our media in the public gallery allow us to move on from this and stop dragging what's now old news through the papers day after day. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay, then let's move to item 5, public participation. I believe we have one request to address the meeting. Ed Norris. Thank you, Mr. Norris. You have asked to address the meeting in reference to item 6.
Yep.
Just to remind you, and I'm sure you are aware, you have 3 minutes.
Okay. Thank you. Today I'd like to talk about the devolution and the plans for moving in both to a foundational strategic authority that's being proposed tonight, as well as the long-term plan and for pursuing a combined authority deal with, as we know, Bedfordshire, MK, Luton. And firstly, I'd like to express a few concerns I have as a member of the public. Firstly, I see this foundational strategic authority as a bit of a stopgap, unfortunately. The way I see it is the government is going to force us, regardless of what we want, or as you know, members of the public here in West Northants, or as councillors in a council, we are going to have devolution forced on us. That is government policy. Unfortunately, we're in a position where the devolution deal that has been pursued for the last year and a half, we are not wanted in that. I have a quote here from the leader of Milton Keynes City Council in relation to having either Northamptonshire Council involved in a combined authority with them, stating, "No deal is better than a bad deal." That, I don't think, is an attitude that can be worked with in the long term. So I have concerns personally about the pursuing of that deal, and I wanted to know if the council had any plans to look elsewhere, whether that be with Leicestershire and their Rutland deal, or to the north, or whether there was possibility of looking towards Warwickshire, who again are in a similar position to us of not having a devolution deal in place. If we find ourselves in a position where we aren't wanted and we're left out of a combined authority deal, I worry about the funding that we'll end up losing out on because I think we all know here that as an area, Northamptonshire does need a lot of work. It does need a lot of funding, and our infrastructure is in a mess. And the mayoralty, as much as I don't agree wholeheartedly with having an elected mayor and a combined authority, that investment and that money would do so much for people in the area. So I wanted to know what solutions and plans would be in place if we end up in a situation where the likes of Milton Keynes and Luton won't accept and won't have us because we desperately need the funding. Thank you.
Oh, not again.
My fault, I didn't.
It's not your fault, it's my responsibility. All right, I understand Councillor Mark Arnold intends to move a motion without notice to suspend Standing Order 29.6. Councillor Mark Arnold.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I move that under paragraph 15.1 Council meeting procedural rules, that procedure 29.6 be suspended and that speech times be extended to 10 minutes for the proposer and 5 minutes for the group leaders and 2 minutes for other speakers. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
And who is going to second the motion?
Pleased to second that, Madam Chairman.
And a vote.
And a vote. Can we have a vote, please, as to whether we can suspend? Well, of course, it's carried. What more? All right, now I invite Councillor Mark Arnold to introduce the report and move the proposal.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you to Mr Norris, who's taken time to come to our chamber today to speak to the report. I hope the report itself that's available on our Modern Gov website and the delivery and debate in the chamber will provide adequate answers to his queries. So today I'm pleased to introduce the report on the future devolution options for West Northamptonshire. Today's item asks us to consider the next steps in shaping how power, funding and strategic decision-making can be brought closer to the people we represent. As members will recall, the Council previously submitted an expression of interest in January 2025 for a South Midlands Strategic Authority, and today I sit on the South Midlands Authority Board that met just this week. The proposal reflected over a decade of collaboration with neighbouring areas and well-established functional economic geography in which we sit. However, because we are not all 6 authorities sharing the same consensus view at the moment, the government did not include the South Midlands in last year's devolution priority programme. Since then, the national landscape has moved on quickly. On the 12th of February this year, the government invited local leaders, including myself, again to come forward, this time with expressions of interest to form foundation strategic authorities, with submissions due by the 20th of March. So today's meeting is about providing an opportunity for members present to offer your feedback, your opinions, your thoughts, support or objection to what we're doing, but to hear those views and have those views reflected in a document that is submitted by the 20th as democracy stands. These foundation authorities reflect the first steps on a national pathway to unlock deeper devolved powers and long-term investment in the years ahead. Members will note from the report that devolution is now becoming the norm. 61% of England's population is already covered by a devolution arrangement, and areas selected in last year's priority programme have secured long-term investment funds ranging from £11 to £44 million per year for the next 30 years. Combined authorities will also be the conduit for future funding for infrastructure, transport and housing. By contrast, West Northamptonshire has so far missed out on at least £300 million of funding by not being part of a devolution area to date. At the same time, the government is consulting on proposed geographies for its spatial development strategies, we call SDS. These are strategic plans that will guide housing infrastructure, economic growth and environmental planning across sub-regions for the next quarter century. These SDS areas are expected to align with future devolution footprints. With the SDS consultation closing on the 26th of March, it's also vital that we give the government a clear signal of our preferred geography now to avoid the risk of being misaligned or dangerously left behind. So why does this matter for West Northamptonshire? It's about investment and economic growth. Without a devolution, funding streams such as the UK's Shared Prosperity Fund, which now ended, and new national pots, such as a £900 million local growth fund allocated last autumn, have been targeted entirely at mayoral areas. If we don't act, we risk continuing to miss out on the investment needed for skills, infrastructure, business support and regeneration across our communities. It's about local control over strategic decisions. A foundation strategic authority would give us greater influence over decisions currently made in Whitehall on key issues including transport, skills, housing, spatial planning and economic development. These decisions shape residents' daily lives and they are better made by local leaders who understand the local priorities. They present a stronger collective regional voice. As a central part of the Oxford-Cambridge growth corridor, West Northampton is well placed to benefit from being part of a coherent, strategically aligned regional bloc. A strong strategic authority, whether initially at a Northamptonshire FSA level or potentially expanding in future, would allow us to make the case for investment and innovation with far greater impact. So my report today recommends that members of this council look at and agree the principles of devolution and support progressing towards a foundation strategic authority for a combined Northamptonshire. It recommends submitting an expression of interest for Northamptonshire FSA working jointly with North Northants Council. It makes clear that our strategic preference remains a South Midlands or South Midlands plus footprint, and that we remain open to expanding the geography in future should consensus allow. And as Mr Norris pointed out, the Milton Keynes group absolutely voted against participation of West and North Northamptonshire last year. But, as I'll come to in a second, geography can change on political landscape. It aligns our spatial development strategy consultation response with the same geography. And lastly, the report recommends and importantly notes that an expression of interest is not a legally binding commitment, but simply the first step in shaping our own destiny, rather than having a model imposed upon us by ministerial direction later on. So, it's a moment of opportunity and some risk. So, members, if we do nothing, devolution could ultimately be imposed upon us, as Mr Norris rightly pointed out. The government's been clear that it intends the majority of England to be covered by strategic authorities by the end of this Parliament. Choosing not to express an interest now would put a risk of us losing control over that geography, the timings, and the terms of any future devolution arrangements. But by acting now and stepping into the devolution pathway as a foundation strategic authority, we would ensure that West Northamptonshire has a voice, a choice, and a seat at the table as the national picture evolves. This moment is about positioning our area for a long-term success, attracting investment, enabling growth, strengthening our communities, and ensuring that major decisions about our future are not shaped in Westminster, but right here in West Northamptonshire. Members will also appreciate the political landscape in itself is likely to shift again in just a few weeks' time. With local elections in May in some neighbouring authorities, there is every possibility that current positions or preferred geographies, regional partnerships or devolution partnerships and pathways may evolve. Changes in leadership or political control elsewhere could open up new opportunities for consensus, or equally, reinforce existing divisions. It is therefore all the more important that West Northamptonshire signals a clear and proactive stance now, ensuring we remain at the table as these dynamics inevitably change around us. Members, this is a strategic, considered and responsible set of recommendations. It does not bind us into a financial model of devolution. It keeps the door open, and crucially, it keeps us in control. I commend my report to Council. Thank you.
I thank you, Councillor Arnold, and I invite James Petter to second the proposal.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to second this motion and reserve my right to reply.
Thank you very much indeed. I will now invite speakers to comment, starting with the group leaders. I have a list in front of me. Nobody's pressing buttons. Councillor Dan Lister, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My concerns today are not about devolution in principle. The government is imposing it whether areas want it or not, and I understand that reality. My concerns are about this proposal, this process, and this timing. In January 2025, this council formally committed to South Midlands, submitting an expression of interest in the devolution priority programme alongside our partner authorities. Then in June last year, this chamber debated it again. A motion was put reaffirming South Midlands as our preferred geography. Conservatives, Labour, Liberal Democrat and Independent members voted for it. The administration voted against it and used its majority to defeat it. Every opposition group, every political tradition aligned behind South Midlands. The administration inherited that clear cross-party direction and voted it down. What followed was 10 months in which this report contains no evidence of engagement with neighbouring authorities, no attempt to build South Midlands consensus. When the government invitation arrived in February, the report before us was not signed off until the 9th of March, 4 days before this meeting. Scrutiny bypassed, the exact wording of the submission still undecided. The decision delegated entirely to the leader, and whatever the leader submits, this chamber will not see before it goes. 10 months of opportunity, 4 days of process. The justification in the 20th of March deadline, members should look at what the government actually said. The minister stated the government would begin reviewing responses from the 20th of March, the language of a rolling review, not a cut-off. The officer report itself calls it a soft deadline. Every other area in our position is taking time or actively building larger partnerships with neighbours. This timetable was chosen. It was not imposed on us. I anticipate the argument that South Midlands is not available. That deserves scrutiny. The government permits a single authority FSA only in exceptional circumstances where there is genuinely no credible natural partner. Cornwall is geographically isolated with nothing to its west. Warwickshire faced the West Midlands Combined Authority permanently and institutionally closing the door. Those are structural impossibilities. Northamptonshire is not in that position. The officer report itself confirms South Midlands meets all criteria for devolution. The obstacle is not geography, it is a political position held by one council whose entire membership faces election in just 8 weeks. One of the BLMK authorities itself has called pressing ahead with BLMK only planning geography premature. The South Midlands door is not as closed as this report implies. The government's own white paper is explicit on this point. Devolution geographies must not create islands, areas too small to go it alone or without a natural partner. Northamptonshire has a natural partner. The government's own test works against this submission. 5 years on from becoming 2 separate councils, this administration is presenting their reunification as our devolution offer. No mayor, no strategic scale, just a return to the footprint we moved away from in 2021. Meanwhile, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough have a 30-year, £600 million investment fund. If South Midlands forms without us, we are surrounded by better resourced neighbours on every side with no mayor and no equivalent fund. That is the worst of all worlds. Milton Keynes has whole council elections on the 7th of May. Every single seat under new war boundaries, just 8 weeks away. We are being asked to signal to government that Northamptonshire has moved on from South Midlands before that election has even taken place. The administration will say the expression of interest is non-binding. In practice, it creates momentum, sets expectation, and because the government has explicitly stated that devolution and planning geographies must align, simultaneously locks in our response to the spatial planning consultation. So this is not just a devolution decision, it's a planning decision with 20-year consequences. They may argue this is simply a stepping stone to South Midlands later. Read the resolution, though. It describes South Midlands as the best geography, but in the very same paragraph submits for something smaller, with a vague caveat of openness to expanding the footprint should the right opportunity subsequently become available. No trigger, no timeline, no mechanism for this chamber to enforce it. That is not a commitment to South Midlands, it is a wish expressed in the same breath as an action that contradicts it. And even if that were a genuine commitment, the white paper describes a single FSA as a stepping stone to mayoral status, not a different geography. Once an FSA is established, governance structures, statutory plans, and government programme relationships bed in. There is no precedent for an established FSA being dissolved into larger geography. We will be solving a temporary political problem by creating a permanent institutional one. This is not a vote against devolution. It is a vote against locking in a smaller geography on a self-imposed timetable 8 weeks before the council that has blocked the better option faces its voters. Without scrutiny, without a mandate from this chamber, and without a single enforceable commitment to the destination the administration claims to want. Every group in this chamber except one has pointed towards South
Could you
Midlands.
finish, please, Councillor Lister?
The question is simple. Do we ratify a failure of ambition, or do we hold out for a short delay and a better outcome? For those reasons, I will be voting against. My group has a free vote today. I would be interested to know whether others in this chamber have been afforded the same. Thank you.
I invite Sally Keeble, please, to speak. 5 minutes, my dear.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. This is a key decision for West Northants for many years to come in terms of shaping our economy, our place in the national economy and infrastructure, and how we relate to other authorities. It's our chance as a new unitary to prove ourselves and take our place in the mainstream of local government infrastructure, bearing in mind that it's a very uncertain world and there's a lot of work to do to make any of this a reality. The Labour Group will be supporting these recommendations, but with some comments and caveats. There's a lot in this report about all the decisions and opportunities that lie before us as a council. The government we have to convince, the other local authorities we have to convince, and the alliances we have to forge. And those will indeed be difficult. But we agree that we need to be part of the local government mainstream, and we need to negotiate our way carefully and step by step into it. However, one of the key things we have to do is to take with us a public who have seen a lot of local government restructuring, ongoing shuffling around of bureaucracies, and meanwhile are still absolutely crying out for improved service delivery. And if we don't, in the course of pursuing these high-level strategic discussions and arrangements, persuade them that they will indeed deliver a better life for them, we will see them further disengaged from local government. And of course, it is going to be harder to persuade them to go in with Northamptonshire, which we've only just left, than it would be to go into the much more ambitious project, which is the South Midlands, which I think is where we all want to get to. I see that in paragraph 771 of the report, there's discussion of consultation and communication, only 2.5 lines in 120 pages of documentation. These are points that will be key in this that are covered in the report. We have to spell out how these proposals will benefit the public in terms that mean something to them. For example, does consolidation of local transport funding mean we will get better buses, more buses, or even in some places, some buses? And what difference will the council having an, I quote, heat network zoning coordination role make either to me, my life, or the lives of the people that I represent? It's not that I'm arguing for those kind of slogans that have, 365 million a day more for the NHS, but we do need language that people understand. It's very easy in the local government bubble, as much as a bubble as a Westminster bubble, to speak to ourselves and not relate these structures to the reality of people's lives. And secondly, we need to finish clearing up some of the issues left over from the last reorganisation to make sure that we're properly prepared. There are still local government buildings whose future is uncertain, and Section 106 money that's stuck in the system somewhere. We need to make sure that we don't have duplication and we don't see services or facilities slip through the cracks. So we need a much stronger commitment to scrutiny, including by people who had experience of the last exercise, and we have quite a number of them in this chamber. Finally, on devolution, I completely agree with devolving power. 7.6 sets out community impact, only 8 lines, one of which is that devolution will transfer power out of Westminster and into the hands of local leaders, allowing communities to be better represented in major decisions that affect them. Well, we could reflect that quite a lot of local leaders want to get into Westminster, and we need to make sure that we stay the course and really work through this at the local level. So, I want to repeat the point that if this is supposed to be about devolution, that should not just be to us as councillors, but to the public, to empower them, bring real improvements to their lives. And for that, we have to carry them with us and make sure that we negotiate in fine detail the implications of these very major moves. Thank you.
I thank you, Councillor Keeble. Now we move on to Councillor Jonathan Harris. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, councillors. So what we have before us is effectively Hobson's choice, an illusion that real choices are available. We're being given, rather like a child in a cake shop, an illusion of a full range of tasty choices, when in fact all we have in front of us is the default position of a plain biscuit. Now let me be clear, this is not to decry or downplay Northamptonshire, which is an amazing, beautiful county. But it simply isn't substantive enough to be a devolved regional area. It does rather feel as though we're scrabbling around to find some sort of unclear option to be included in future devolution. A model which is based on West and North Northamptonshire Unitary Councils simply won't cut it. Over the last 5 years since the creation of the Northamptonshire Unitary Authorities, we've seen increased disaggregation of services, not less. More separation, more doing our own thing. So the last things our residents need is to be sold some fictitious magic solution for day-to-day funding challenges and service provision, when actually going back to a Northamptonshire county-sized model is potentially a retrograde step. Let me give a practical example. Buses under the county, particularly in its latter days, were dire. Yes, some of this was linked to the legacy problems that we're all well versed in. However, since the inception of WNC, improvements have been made in this area. We have benefited from government bus service improvement funding, and we're seeing some service growth and investment in infrastructure, such as shelters and paperless timetables. I'm concerned that we could lose this locally focused approach. A wider concern: this is being done to people, to our residents. Where is their voice? They, like us, don't want or like backroom deals. If any of you have been to any of the local plan roadshows for residents, what you may have heard is people consistently say, all this extra growth when you can't actually fix or maintain what you've got. True devolution should be about transfer of powers from central government to local and regional authorities, allowing them to govern and make decisions relevant to their areas. Authorities that are in touch with their communities, connected to them, and genuinely seeking to make decisions for those communities, not just relentlessly chasing the dollar for economic growth alone. So we know that foundational authorities will, in theory, have devolved powers over transport, infrastructure, skills, housing, economic development, regeneration, environment, net zero, trigger word, should have given a health warning, well-being and public service reform, public safety, and of course the government is also currently consulting on giving foundation strategic authorities the power to raise an overnight visitor levy. Now the carrot appears to be sign up to these foundation authorities and we might give you some cash. But even if the government agrees to an FSA between North and West, it is described only as a stepping stone towards a full combined authority status. Northamptonshire has sadly already potentially missed the boat. I've heard various funding figures mentioned that we've already missed out on because we're not included in the BLMK South Midlands deal. An FSA seems like the poor relation. Access to some funding, but not in the same way as a regional combined authority. And really, we're being asked to express an interest in something when we don't even know what it looks like. As a principle, we believe that devolving powers closer to people is absolutely the right thing to do. We will, as a Lib Dem group this evening, therefore, somewhat reluctantly, be supporting these proposals, simply as the best of a bad job. However, there are many concerns that remain, so we do not support unconditionally. We believe that we must advocate for true regional status and not simply a return to the existing county boundaries. This is the only way that we will see real benefits of devolution. A real return to the old county boundary for a foundational authority is too inwardly focused and risks West Northamptonshire taking a step backwards. A Northamptonshire Plus option could be more like progress. Our residents deserve a system that works for them, hears them, represents them, and not some hybrid that simply serves government by providing an evolving mechanism that isn't entirely clear to anyone. So back to Hobson. The choice becomes effectively take it or leave it, whereby leaving it is clearly undesirable. Thank you.
I thank you, Councillor Jonathan Harris. And now we move on to Councillor John Slope.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I want to speak briefly in support of this recommendation. As Cabinet Member for Finance, my job is to look at the numbers, and the numbers here are stark. Areas that secured a place on the devolution priority programme last year are now receiving up to 44 million a year for the next 30 years. West Northamptonshire receives none of that. The report before us today is clear. By missing that programme, this area has already foregone at least 300 million in regional funding. That is not a future risk, that is money we are not receiving right now. So the question before this council today is not whether devolution is perfect, it certainly isn't. The question is whether we sit on our hands while others areas invest in infrastructure, skills and growth, or whether we decide to get to the table and fight for our share. I'd also say that to any colleague who's cautious about what we're signing up to, We're not signing up to anything today. This is an expression of interest. It opens a negotiation. A full report will come back to Council before any legal commitments are made. Voting against this report doesn't protect West Northamptonshire, it simply removes our seat at the table. And if we don't take that seat voluntarily, as we've heard, the government has been explicit, devolution will eventually be directed upon us anyway. I would rather we shape the geography and terms than have them handed to us by Whitehall. This is the pragmatic, commercially sensible thing to do, and I'm happy to support it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Slope. Councillor Bob Purser.
There you are.
Thank you, Chair. I think I've got 3 points. Firstly, I think the geography is pretty clear, and although we look towards Leicester for health and policing, the economic geography is that we're part of the South Midlands, so that seems to me beyond doubt. The second point is I'm concerned about the cynicism and concerns of our Speaker and also Councillor Harris. Devolution is not being forced on us. Government is making a decision to move functions locally. That's an opportunity. It's not being forced on us. This is a sensible movement in local government to get things out of Whitehall and closer to localities. Labour governments understand this, and this is why they're doing it. The third point I've got is that we've really got to show that we can work together. We've got to work together with our colleagues in the north, and we've got to find ways of working with our colleagues across Milton Keynes and Bedford and the other South Midlands authorities. We need to put more effort into that, and we all need to work towards developing the kind of healthy partnerships that will make this arrangement work. So those are my 3 points. Thank you, Chair.
I thank you, Bob Purser. Councillor Christine Ware.
Thank you, Chair. It seems to me that a foundation strategic authority is just the first rung on the ladder to mayoral strategic authority and ultimately onto an established mayoral authority. The current EMAs have been established through devolution by deal process. The government has indicated that this will be replaced by devolution by default as a way of establishing mayoral strategic authorities over geographies covering at least 1.5 million people. This raises the question of how long before we're here to debate the next rung on the devolution ladder, because foundation strategic authority is no longer fit for our purpose. As one of the councils not allocated a geography, which does feel a bit like we're on the Billy No Mates list of councils, it is imperative that we find a way to shape our future rather than wait for somebody else to invite us to the party. We must look to other areas that can complement and supplement the great things that Northamptonshire has to offer. And that means that we need to look for a Northamptonshire Plus option. We should be looking for progressive and forward-thinking areas to work with. Therefore, in relation to the paper recommendations in section 3.1 part B, I believe we should be expressing more clearly and overtly an interest in what we do want, whilst understanding that at this stage, agreements with other councils are to be and should be explored. As it's worded at present, the recommendation sounds like we are prepared to accept the Billy No Mates label. We should be continuing to look for the opportunity to work with North Northants and others outside Northamptonshire, with the Northamptonshire only option being the very, very last resort. Currently, it suggests to me that we're paying lip service to wanting to work with others and will settle for a Northants only option first and foremost because we don't have anybody else. Whatever we do, the principle must be to put residents of West Northants first. Thank you, Chair.
I thank you, Councillor Ware. Councillor Hastie.
Madam Chairman, colleagues, I instinctively worry that devolution could simply mean yet another layer of bureaucracy placed on top of the system we already have. The British state has an extraordinary ability to simplify governance by adding another layer. That is a legitimate concern. None of us came into local government to create more committees, more structures, or more distance between decision makers and the people we serve. I, however, think it is important that we are clear about what it is actually being proposed this afternoon. This report does not commit West Northamptonshire to a permanent government structure or geographical fit. What it does allow us to do is explore our options alongside neighbouring areas so that we remain part of the national devolution conversation. If we choose not to engage, the reality is very simple. The conversation will continue without us. The current government will still reshape the landscape of regional governments. Funding and strategic investment will still flow through these new arrangements. The only difference is that West Northamptonshire will not be at the table helping shape those decisions. And that, in my view, would be the worst possible outcome. Strategic authorities are intended to deal with issues that already operate across council boundaries: transport, infrastructure, major economic investment, skills and long-term growth. Those are areas where coordination across a wider economic geography can bring real benefits to our residents and businesses. But local services, local planning decisions, local housing responsibilities, those remain with this council and with the councillors elected by our communities. So the decision is not about surrendering control, it is about ensuring we retain influence over our future, or risk allowing others to decide it for us. It is about keeping West Northamptonshire in the room where the future shape of regional investment and growth will be discussed. For that reason, despite understandable scepticism, I believe the pragmatic and responsible course is to engage with the opportunity and keep our options open. I support this report and ask colleagues to do the same. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
I thank you, Councillor Hastie. I now go to Councillor Fazana Aldridge to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Clearly, West Northamptonshire is losing out by not being part of a devolution area. Devolution is not an option, and our options of who we move forward with in the first instance are at this point limited. Whilst devolution provides significant opportunity for growth and investment within local areas as part of Earth Foundation's strategic authorities, we will need to remain focused on the needs and priorities of local residents in West Northamptonshire. The government's consultation on strategic authorities having the power to implement a visitor levy is welcomed. This area was highlighted by Lib Dems as a potential for income generation to address some of the budgetary challenges being faced by us. I do, however, want to highlight some of the issues and concerns being raised by residents in West Northants about the proposal that is there of West and North Northamptonshire only. Many remember the dysfunctional local authority and dire situation that led to the dissolution of previous structures and the creation of the two separate authorities. Return to old county structure is seen as a backward step by many residents and a massive waste of public resources to date. The financial impact of the original disaggregation continues to contribute to the many financial challenges we face. North and West together is not the ideal way forward on a permanent basis. We need to explore all possible options and do all that we can to be part of a wider regional strategic authority, and only North and West together must be a last resort. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I thank you, Councillor Aldridge. And now, Councillor Adrian Cartwright.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, fellow councillors. With this failing Labour government deciding that expressions of interest in becoming a foundation strategic authority are required to be in with just over a month's notice, we are placed in a situation where we need to be open with the public about where this leaves us as an authority. The other parties in our possible mayoral areas did not wish to include us in the bid. Therefore, we are left out of being able to access vital funding for our future development. We must have an option to unite with North Northants Council for this devolution process to be fully prepared to offer ourselves as able to support Northamptonshire residents through our unitary council positions and will create a population around 800,000 strong. Mayoral strategic authorities, MSAs, are expected to incorporate 1.5 million people, and clearly Northamptonshire is well over half of a proposed MSA, all on our own. Ideally, I believe that government should truly devolve to the unitaries. We could have a shadow committee to look at strategic planning. We really don't need an extra layer of government between us and Westminster. That said, we must declare our intentions to participate in the process and, as we said last May, we would do things in view of the electorate. That is why we are here today, and scrutiny will be involved moving forward. I support this proposal and recommend we all do. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
I thank you, Councillor Cartwright. And now, ladies and gentlemen, councillors, we go for a free-for-all. You must use your button to be able to speak. Therefore, I invite Councillor Fiona Baker. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't actually going to speak on this until I'd actually heard what other people had said, but I think there's a misconception here about the unitary councils, because the reason that Northamptonshire failed, in my opinion, and I was there at the time, was because it was too big for the day-to-day business that it had to operate. This is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a high-level structure above all of that to make decisions for our area. And really what I wanted to ask Councillor Arnold is, have you actually considered joining up with Leicestershire and Rutland? Because those of us who work in children's and adult services now know that our health services are in that direction, our police services are in that direction. So to me, having a very logical mind, it would seem suitable that we should join that direction and not worry about Milton Keynes, that basically didn't want us in the beginning because they at the time were a different colour to us, and because of that vast number of people that Councillor Cartwright spoke of that would overtake the voting. So I think we need to look elsewhere rather than try and beg people that didn't want us in the first place to join them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pinder Chauhan, I invite you to speak. 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Reading through the proposals for the West Northamptonshire Council to submit an expression of interest for a Foundation Strategic Authority, I feel like I cannot support the proposal brought forward to Council today, but I just wanted to explain why. Today we are being asked to rush through a major decision with short notice, and this proposal has not been through overview and scrutiny. We have no quantified financial implications, and the final wording will be delegated entirely to the leader. And from what I understand, this council will not see the actual submission before it is sent. And for me, that alone is a reason and a pause for thought. We have also been asked to reverse the very logic that created West Northamptonshire Council in the first place. In 2018, the government deliberately split the county into two because a single authority of 750,000 people was considered too large. Now, only a few years later, we are being told that the only way to access funding is to stitch the county back together again under a new strategic body with unclear powers, unclear costs, and an unclear long-term consequence. We don't know what they are. And it is unnecessary use of time, resource, and effort. We tried to do this properly in 2025, and we supported a South Midlands mayoral strategic authority. That model made economic sense with 6 of those councils working together, and I know we've been debating some of those today. That bid failed because of Milton Keynes refusing to participate. And instead of resolving that issue, we are now being asked to settle a Northamptonshire-only arrangement that nobody has voted for, proposed or scrutinised properly. And I feel that there are significant risks with this proposal. For that reason, I feel that I can't support this.
Councillor Chauhan, please finish.
Just wrapping up. For these reasons, I feel that in the interests of good governance, transparency and accountability, I will not be supporting this. Thank you.
I thank you, Councillor Chauhan. Councillor Ian McCord.
Thank you. Dan, I have a free vote. Madam Chairman, our purpose tonight is to agree that the leader writes to MHCLG to request a meeting, because clearly there's absolutely nothing else demanding our attention. War abroad, energy shock at home, inflation running hot, economic stagnation, care homes, care budget overspends, cratered roads, collapsing pavements, a planning department in triage, MPH wobbling on its foundations. But no, tonight we write a letter to arrange a meeting, to begin a process, to speak to Martin Griffiths, leader of North Northants. Why not just phone him? We either hold out for something meaningful, a South East Midlands deal, or we do nothing. This foundation devolution proposal is pointless. If government wants to force something on us later, it can. It has already given itself the power to do that, exactly that. And Bob, there is no opt-out. But we should not help it manufacture the illusion of progress, another expression of enthusiasm to tick a box in Whitehall. Why assist this government continue its quest to make us more like North Korea, as led by a Dalek with less charisma? Back in January 2025, we were told a strategic mayor was imminent with an election in a few weeks' time in May 2026. How's that going? So if we must write something tonight, Madam Chairman, I suggest we write to Santa, because Santa isn't woke. Girls' toys, boys' toys, based on one metric, naughty or nice. Delivers more in one night than most governments manage in a lifetime to every sex, race, creed and religion on earth. Never says we're waiting for the EDI framework refresh, net zero audit or the update draft to the draft update. He just delivers on time and crucially what he promised. So while I appreciate the optimism behind this report, I cannot pretend it represents progress. It is motion without movement, effort without outcome.
Thank you, Councillor
Looking busy
McCord.
while going
Thank you.
nowhere, confusing activity for progress. So I remain, very politely, entirely unconvinced. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
I thank you, Councillor Ian McCord. I wonder what Santa Claus would have said to that, but never mind. We will never know. Councillor Rosie Humphreys, I invite you to speak for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor McCord, you, as always, continue to entertain us and surprise us. I wouldn't have taken you for someone who actually still believes in Father Christmas. Councillor Baker, as to the failure of the County Council under the Conservative administration, I don't recall any reference in the Max Caller report to the size of the organisation being a contributory factor. It was a scandalous lack of oversight and scrutiny. And as regards not scrutinising this proposal, last year there was no scrutiny and the responsibility was entirely for the leader, Councillor Brown, as it then was, as I recall. And this decision is devolution is being forced on us. Let's make no bones about it. And it already feels that once again we're on the back foot. Councillor Harris has mentioned net zero. That's one of the responsibilities of foundation authorities, also mentioned in another context by Councillor McCord and Santa, I think. But given this administration scrapped our local targets, if we're looking further afield, will this Councillor Arnold and his cabinet colleagues feel comfortable with liaising with, for example, Cambridge County Council, Cambridge and Peterborough City Councils, Milton Keynes City Council, all of which take their climate responsibilities seriously and have committed to being net zero by 2030. Equally, will these more progressive authorities wish to collaborate with West and North Hants? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. My final speaker today, before we move on, is Councillor Enam Hack.
Thank you, Chair. The Labour Group will be supporting these proposals. We recognise that
we recognise that this will not be straightforward. Previous attempts to join the South Midlands group did not succeed, and there will be a work ahead of us in building alliances and overcoming some long-standing differences. But the opportunity here is clear. Joining a combined authority would give this area a stronger voice, great access to government funding, and the ability to plan strategically with our neighbours, rather than trying to go it alone. It would connect us more closely to the successful economies around us, and beyond that to London and East and South East, creating opportunities for our residents and businesses. It would also strengthen our ability to secure investment in strategic infrastructure we need, particularly transport. I recognise that building a closer alliance with North Northants may raise questions, given that we have only recently separated. We will need to make the case clearly and take the public with us. But the reality is that the local government landscape is changing. Remaining an isolated unitary authority risks weakening our position. This is only the first step, but standing still is not a strategy. Working with our neighbours gives us a stronger future. For those reasons, the Labour Group will be supporting these proposals. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I thank you, Councillor Haq. And now we return to Councillor James Petter. You had reserved your right to speak.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. The decision is really about one simple question. Do we want a seat at the table, or do we want decisions made about us without us? I would like to remind Councillor Lister, communication goes both ways, and thank him and maybe his whole team for their total lack of misunderstanding of the concept of devolution in this report. Quite truly amazing. Today, we have heard from all sides of this chamber, and make no mistake, this debate is about ensuring West Northamptonshire does not miss the opportunity that many other parts of the country have already secured. Devolution is not theoretical anymore. It's here on our doorstep, and we need to move with it. As mentioned, 61% of the population now lives with devolution. Those areas are receiving long-term investments, as already mentioned again, between 11 million to 44. That's 330 million up to 1.3 billion. Big numbers. The proposal before us is simply to submit an expression of interest for the Foundation Strategic Authority. As mentioned several times, this does not legally commit our council to do anything, but keeps us in the conversation, protect our ability to shape what happens next. Remember, we already have strong regional working collaborations in the South Midlands, and quite a few have been mentioned already. We host shared services like the Growth Hub, the Careers Hub, Connection to Work, and we sit at the centre of the Oxford-Cambridge Growth Corridor, one of the most significant economic areas in the country. For all of us here today, it's straightforward. We need to engage, influence and protect the interests of West Northamptonshire. The levy has been mentioned many times, by the way. Unfortunately, there is no guarantee it ends up in our bank account, by the way. Submitting an expression of interest does not exactly. So anyway, just please, I support this report, and I urge all others to do the same. Thank you.
I thank you, Councillor Petter. And now we return to Councillor Mark Arnold to respond to the debate. 2 minutes, please, Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I might ask for your discretion if I waver over somewhat, since the vast contribution just sits with me to respond. So, the report and the motion that came forward last year, we absolutely defeated the motion in this place because it failed to pay attention to other geography that was an option. And I'll ask members to respect that I do discuss things with ministers. I do meet my neighbouring colleagues in North Northants, and we do actually speak. So we share in knowledge. I actually had the benefit of meeting Blake Stevenson MP yesterday in Westminster, and a really, really beneficial discussion. He, for members who don't know, is the MP for Mid-Beds, an area which is also affected by the footprint we've got. So that was a very beneficial discussion, and it seemed the political will was in Mid-Beds for what we're all advocating for. And this report also makes it really, really clear. We are advocating for a strategic mayoral authority, or SMA+. But the very steps we've got to get there, as is made clear, is through a foundation strategic authority first. The Minister, Miatta Fawn Bula, and I met with Martin Griffiths, the leader of North Northampton, a number of weeks ago. I've made reference to that here. And I've also attended the England's Economic Heartland meeting, where I put questions to the ministerial champion for the Oxcam Growth Arc, Lord Patrick Vallance, and Matthew Pennycook, the Housing Minister and Planning Minister. Those points were made really clear about advocacy for the best deal for West Northampton. I'm very clear, as the team behind me, that that is SMA, as we've all advocated for, or some members have before in this chamber. So where we are today is about doing the first steps to get there. The Minister made it clear to me in discussion that they are quite content with BLMK, as is, blocked by Pete Marland, the outgoing Labour leader, not standing for election, and we need to pay attention to the geography is very likely to change on May the 7th this year at the local elections. And that's why the team behind me will be supporting the reform campaign down in Milton Keynes to return members to office and get rid of this horrendous Labour government quicker than ever. We will continue doing that. I will work with Conservative colleagues in the Milton Keynes area to get this best deal over the line, overturn that motion that was put in there and advocate for the best deal. And just as a point of service, we should all... Thank you, Mr Vice Chair. The leader of Luton Council has resigned this week and indicating stepping down at their annual meeting in May, and 19 years of local government service. So my thoughts with Hazel Simmons there. But equally, elections taking place in that footprint next year as well. So I ask members to support this today. It is an expression of interest to open negotiation and put this town and this West Northampton Authority on the map and get the right deal for all of us long term. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
I thank you, Councillor Mark Arnold. Before we go to the vote, I'd just like to say something. As Jonathan Harris has reminded us, we live in an amazingly beautiful county. Our residents deserve the best. This is an expression of interest. It is the beginning, as Councillor Arnold has just said, of the process. I hope that you have all thought seriously about the way you wish to vote. I thank you. And so now we vote to go, abstain, or abstentions. The vote is carried. I thank you very much. I thank you for your collaboration. I thank you for your tolerance of each other. And now, item 7, urgent business.
Madam Chairman, it may not be urgent, but at the last meeting, Councillor Keeble challenged me to share my copy of How to Teach Economics to Your Dog, and with your permission, I would like to give that to her.
Well done. I thank you for your humour. I thank you. I want to know, Councillor Sally Keeble, have you got the return copy of another book?
I want my own photocall, so I shall do it at the next meeting.
Next time, I'll hold you to it.
Unlike Labour, I keep my promises.
Well, we know. Oh. All right, ladies and gentlemen. And so...
Chair, may I?
Councillor Hastie.
Very brief. I know everyone wants to get away. I just wanted to say I hope on behalf of all members an expression of thanks to everyone who participated in last week's International Women's Day celebrations here, all the organisers, all the nominees, all the charities, the choir, and all the officers' hard work. I know it was a bit overshadowed by an unfortunate remark, but it was a truly inspirational day, and I just wanted to thank everyone concerned.
I thank you, Councillor Hastie, for those timely remarks. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for all your attendance. We're running ahead of time, 10 to 6. Good night. Drive safely.